Hey everybody! Alright, so we are now on to part 2 of chapter 1. Not much has happened. We have Mac, who's a reporter, following the SWAT team, and we learned a little bit more about the SWAT team. They all have weird ass names. Alright, on to part 2. Dixon finished up his conversation with the lieutenant and two civilians, who disappeared back into the operations vehicle. The SWAT commander then turned and said something to Taylor, who nodded. Damn, she wished she could hear what they were saying. A few moments later, Taylor and the other two SWAT officers headed for the brick building, reaching under their helmets to pull knit caps down to cover their faces as they went. Before they got there, the three men split up, each disappearing around a different part of the building. You'd think they would go in with more people than that, she said. Maybe some of them entered the building before we got here, Zack suggested. You know, like an advanced recon team. Mac blinked. Where the hell had that come from? An advanced recon team? He stopped, taking pictures to give her a superior look. Hey, I play video games. I know the lingo. She shook her head. Men. Mac turned back to see what Dixon was up to and saw him looking over at their undercover van. Crap. She started to duck down into the seat, but caught herself. What the heck was she worrying about? The windows were too tinted for him to see anything at this distance. His gaze lingered on them for a moment longer before he said something to the two patrol officers nearby, then climbed into the operations vehicle. Matt grabbed the door handle. Oh. Where are you going? Zack asked in a voice that said he knew exactly where she was going, and that he also knew he couldn't stop her. He'd given up trying a long time ago. I'm going to look around to see if there's anything interesting happening, maybe get a few pictures. Zack frowned but held his tongue. Another thing he'd learned over time. I'll go with you. She reached into her bag for the digital camera she carried on little sneak and peek missions like this. It was small, simple to operate, and took higher quality pictures than her cell phone. She tucked it in her back pocket. Nah, I'm good. I'll be back in a few minutes. She slipped out the door and closed it before Zack could insist. And he would, on principle, but she didn't like having him involved in this kind of stuff. She was willing to be stupid with her own neck, but she sure wasn't going to let him risk his. Zack was good at a lot of things, but he sucked at the sneaky, danger mouse stuff. Fortunately, he knew it and never tried to force her to take him along. Be careful, he called out. She nodded and hurried down the block away from the scene. As soon as she reached the end of the block, she started jogging. Cop cars zipped past her, lights flashing and sirens wailing, but nobody paid attention to a woman who seemed to be doing the same thing, running into the opposite direction of trouble. The moment she was out of sight, she turned down an alley and worked her way back toward the rear of the building where all the crap was going down. If she could sneak inside and find a place to hide, she'd be able to observe the SWAT team in action and see how messy things really got. This is such a terrible fucking idea. There are apparently 30 hostages, there's apparently 5 shooters, people have already been hurt, cops have been shot, and this fucking girl wants to go inside where the drama is to take pictures of the fucking SWAT team. Oh god, this is where I stopped reading it earlier. Here we go. She had no doubt things were going to get messy. Why? Because she was here now, and things always seemed to get messy when she showed up. Zack said it was because she had the nose for finding trouble. Maybe he was right. That used to scare her parents to death when she was a kid. It probably still did, but it proved to be an invaluable talent for a journalist. Maybe shit got messed up because you fucking messed it up. She looked left, then right, then darted across the street. She couldn't believe the SWAT team didn't have anyone covering the back of the building. But there wasn't a cop in sight. Nice job securing the scene, assholes. Wait. First of all, why isn't the back door covered? And why is the SWAT going through the fucking back? Like, it's a book. It's just a book. Gotta advance the plot. Maybe they weren't the hotshots everyone made them out to be. She was just about to grab the handle when the door burst open. Mac barely had time to gasp before a man with a baseball cap on backwards and a chest full of tattoos lifted a big rifle and aimed it at her. Her heart stopped. Instinct told her to run, or at least scream for help, but before she could do either, a SWAT officer in tactical gear dropped from above and knocked the thug to the ground with some kind of martial arts chop to the back of his tattooed neck. Okay. So the door was covered. Don't I feel like an asshole? She stared at the man lying unconscious on the ground, then at the cop before looking up to see a rope. Rappelling rope? I don't think I'm saying that right, but that's okay. Swaying back and forth against the side of the three-story building. How the heck had he dropped down fast enough to do that? Mac opened her mouth to identify herself, but the SWAT officer closed the space between them in the blink of an eye and slapped a gloved hand over her mouth. She automatically reached up to grab his hand, but then froze as she locked eyes with his. He was wearing a ski mask, so all she could see were those eyes and a small amount of smooth brown skin around them. It had to be Mike Taylor or Jaden Brooks, the only two African American members of the team. Since she hadn't seen Brooks go in, it had to be Taylor, but for the life of her she couldn't remember his eyes being a shocking shade of gold in his personal file photo. Maybe because they weren't glamour shots. Movement caught her attention, and Mac darted a quick look to her right to see two uniformed officers appear out of nowhere. When had her SWAT savior called them? Get them out of here, the golden-eyed man said softly, and keep her quiet. And just like that, one of the uniformed cops wrapped their arms around her waist from behind and picked her up, putting his hand over her mouth, when Taylor pulled his away. I'm sorry, what? So he tells the guys to get them out of here and to keep her quiet. And the cop picks her up from behind and proceeds to keep his hand over her mouth. Is that SOP? She watched helplessly as the other cop grabbed the unconscious gunman and heaved him over his shoulder in a fireman's carry, then ran toward the front of the building. When she looked back, the SWAT officer was nowhere to be seen. Where the heck had he gone? If all of the guys in the tactical unit were this fast and powerful, she could imagine why Marvin thought they were on something. Nobody should be able to move that fast. Where did these guys come from? But didn't she say there was a back door? So wouldn't he have just gone through the back door? Like, I'm really overanalyzing this shit for no reason. Her captor followed his partner, running down the alley with her like she was an unruly kid in a movie theater. She was so shocked she didn't even struggle, and by the time she thought about it, they were at the SWAT operations vehicle. The minute he planted her firmly on her feet and took his hand away from her mouth, she whirled around to chew him out for manhandling her, and was amazed to discover he was the same uniformed cop Dixon had spoke to earlier. Had the SWAT commander seen the news van and told the cop to keep an eye on her? But that was impossible. No one had eyesight that good. Maybe, I don't know. Foreshadowing should not be a blunt tool to be used to bludgeon someone over the head with. The officer reached around her and opened the door of the operations vehicle, then motioned her in. She'd about had enough with the cape and cap for the day. I'm not going in there. In here or in the back seat of a cruiser until this is done, a deep voice said from inside. Your call, Miss Stone, but make it quickly. The cop raised an eyebrow, gesturing with one hand toward the open door, and the other across the street where his cruiser was parked. Well, she wanted to get an inside look at how the SWAT team operated. Mac ignored the hand the cop put out to help her, and tried not to stamp her foot as she stepped into the vehicle. Is that an urge women get? Like, I know I'm a girl, I know I'm a woman, but when I'm frustrated, I never really have the urge to stamp my foot. Punch something, maybe, yes. I get those quite a bit. But to stamp my foot, like I'm not fucking 5. So I'm going to reread that. Mac ignored the hand the cop put out to help her and tried not to stamp her foot as she stepped into the vehicle. Please close the door, Officer Danner, said the same deep voice. The door slammed shut, making her jump. Mac pushed her sunglasses up on her head and surveyed the inside of the huge vehicle. The 3 men she'd seen earlier were eyeing her curiously. Gage Dixon, on the other hand, wasn't paying any attention to her at all. He stood with his back to her, his focus locked on the computer monitors attached to the far wall of the vehicle. All 6 screens were on, but the images on 4 of them were moving and changing so fast it made her dizzy to look at them. It took her a moment to realize she was seeing live feeds from cameras mounted on his men's helmets. Funny, she hadn't seen one mounted on Taylor's. Because she was paying attention? Who the hell was she kidding? She hadn't noticed much of anything besides his big muscles and seriously mesmerizing eyes. He might have been naked for all she knew. Nah, she would have noticed that. She never missed a naked man. Okay. I'm a red-blooded woman is the next one, okay? I enjoy hunky men. I really do. And gorgeous eyes. But if I was a trained journalist and someone was about to shoot me, and I've been in some shitty situations, I think I would notice details, besides the fact that he was hunky and had nice eyes. I mean, I'm sure there were other bad guys on the planet who are hunky and have nice eyes. What? But the 4 moving cameras meant Zach had been right. There were more than 3 SWAT officers in there. There were 4. Not that 4 seemed like a lot enough to her, either. She'd want like 50 to do the job. The other 2 screens were stable, showing the inside of the building from 2 different angles. Matt took a step closer to get a better look and saw people lying face down on the floor. At first she thought they were dead, but then she picked up movement. She surveyed the inside of the operations vehicle and was disappointed to see it was nothing more than an RV without all the good stuff that came with it. That wasn't to say it was empty. There were racks for equipment, racks for weapons, and racks for radios, computers, and cameras. There were even 2 whiteboards and a corkboard. A rather detailed drawing of the exterior of the building had been drawn on the whiteboard. Double red lines marked what looked like entry points. Matt glanced at Dixon and the other men. They were all staring at the monitors. Figuring this was her chance to pick up some intel, she slid her hand into her back pocket for her camera. "Please put your camera away, Miss Stone," Dixon said. Mac froze. Damn. Everyone turned to look at her. Well, everyone except Dixon. He was still glued to the monitors. "Why don't you stop being such a fucking nuisance, because there's people's lives on the line?" She pushed the camera back into her pocket. How the hell had he known that she was doing it? I don't know, the same way the teachers have eyes on the back of their goddamn heads. Dixon reached out and thumbed a switch on the box near the monitors. "We just got audio from the room where they're holding the hostages." The sound of quiet sobs and pitiful moans, punctuated with a whole lot of shouting for the hostages to shut the F up, filled the operations vehicle. When the hostages were only silent, black and white video images, if it had... Oh, okay. Let me read the sentence again. When the hostages were only silent black and white video images, it had been possible for Mac to distance herself from the fact that the people lying on the floor, most of whom were women, were real live human beings with mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers, boyfriends and husbands, maybe even kids, and that they were scared to death, but now it was impossible to remain detached. Thanks. Mac edged closer, holding her breath without ever meaning to. One of the gunmen weaved in and out of the hostages, kicking them in an attempt to get them to move somewhere. Most of the women just curled up in the fetal position and cried harder, which only seemed to infuriate the guy kicking them even more. Cursing, he grabbed one of the women by the hair and dragged her out of the camera's view. The woman's terrified screams echoed through the speakers, chilling Mac to the core. She'd seen a lot of violence in her line of work, but that didn't mean she was used to it. She covered her mouth with her hands to keep from shouting at Dixon to tell his damn SWAT team to do something to help. She was a journalist. She was supposed to stay neutral in every situation and just observe. But it was damn hard when she knew that Thug in there was moments away from killing that poor woman, or worse. "Shit, this is bad," the hostage negotiator said. "Those animals are on edge and ready to go over. If your team is going in there, they'd better be quick." Dixon didn't answer, but just spoke softly into the mic he was wearing. A moment later, he turned to the man from the power company. "Are your power people ready?" Hard Hat looked nervous, but he nodded. "When you say the word." Dixon turned his attention to the uniformed officer. "I know you were hoping we wouldn't have to do this, but I need to get my people in there." The man didn't look happy about it, but he nodded. "Do whatever you have to. Just be careful. There's a lot of hostages in there." Mac wasn't sure in a case like this who got to make the call as to when SWAT went in, but regardless, Dixon had smoothly put the lieutenant in the decision loop, making sure he didn't step on any toes he didn't have to. She'd used the trick herself a few times in the past to keep herself on people's good side, even when she could have trampled all over them. He was pretty smart for a muscle-bound trigger puller. Stereotyping much here? Dixon threw a glance at Hard Hat. "On my mark, in 3, 2, 1. Now. At the SWAT commander's signal, why not just fucking say Dixon? Hardhat said a single word into the radio. All at once, every screen on the wall went blank. For a moment, Mac thought the SWAT vehicle had lost power. Then she heard screaming over the speaker and realized he'd cut the power to the building. A half a second later, gunfire erupted. Mac couldn't see a damn thing on the monitors, except the occasional bright orange flashes that reflected off the walls. But while she couldn't see much, she could hear plenty. Women screaming, men cussing, the thud of heavy stuff hitting the floor. And interspersed between it all, the growls of what sounded like pissed-off SWAT team. Man, these guys really got fired up when they went in. It sounded as if they were ready to tear the place apart. Maybe that was what Marvin had meant when he said that they were on something. Right now, she couldn't care less about her story. She only prayed the hostages made it out of this in one piece, although she couldn't imagine how that could be possible, not with all that gunfire. But as fast as the shooting had started, it stopped. Max stared at the pitch-black screen, straining her eyes for something, anything, that would tell her if the hostages were still alive. Gage pressed his index finger to the small bud to his right ear as if listening. Then he turned to Hardhat, flipped the power. The monitors trained on the interior of the building lit up, but not the ones connected to the SWAT officers' helmet cams. Max sagged with relief. The women were huddled together in the center of the room, clearly traumatized but alive. 3 men were on the floor nearby. They were still moving, but it didn't look like they'd be going anywhere. One member of the SWAT team was covering the downed bank robbers, while 2 others moved among the women checking for injuries. Mac didn't see the 4th member of the SWAT team. He must be dealing with the other thugs out of camera's view. Copy that, Gage said in his mic, then glanced at the lieutenant. Scene secure. 5 suspects down, 4 WIA, 1 KIA. No hostages seriously wounded, but a few got trampled in the panic. What does WIA? Oh, wounded in action, killed in action. Gotcha. 4 bad guys wounded, 1 dead. Oh, yeah, next sentence explained it. The lieutenant looked as relieved as Mac felt. I'll get in there with some uniforms and EMTs, start getting everyone out. He brushed past her at a run, slamming the door of the operations vehicle behind him. A few moments later, Hardhat and the hostage negotiator left as well, leaving her alone with the SWAT team leader. Curious despite herself, Mac moved closer to the man so she could see the monitors better. At least that was the excuse she was going with. She watched in silence as police officers and EMTs rushed into the room to take custody of the bank robbers and give first aid to the hostages. Dixon's team fell back, disappearing out of the camera's view. Only then did Dixon take off his headset and turn to face her. So, Miss Stone, did you get what you were looking for? This was the first time Mac had seen Gage Dixon this close up. Saying he was gorgeous didn't even begin to cover it. With his dark hair, chiseled jaw, and sensuous mouth, he was downright devastating. She was especially captivated by his eyes. They were the color of dark honey, or maybe fine whiskey. Either way, it was too easy to get lost in their depths. She gave herself a mental shake and forced herself to look away, if just to catch her breath. What are you talking about? He smiled at her in a way that made her wonder if he knew how off balance he had her. That bothered her. She was used to being the one who put other people off balance. It's obvious you've been snooping around for a story, he said. When your man grabbed me, you mean? She shrugged. That was a complete accident. I got turned around and ended up back there. He chuckled. Right. Just like it's a complete accident that your unmarked news van has been parked outside my SWAT compound for the last 2 days. She tried not to let her surprise show, but failed miserably. You've been sitting there for 2 freaking days. These guys are cops. They're gonna look at that and say, that's suspicious. Maybe run your fucking plates. Are you serious? She's a journalist? Mouth twitching, he turned and switched off the monitors. How the hell had Dixon made her so easily? She and Zach weren't that sloppy, were they? Dixon turned off the monitors, then picked up a cloth and wiped on the whiteboard. Okay, you caught me, she said, but I only resorted to that because the department turned down my request for an interview and a ride-along. He stopped wiping and turned to her, his brow raised in a way that did interesting things to her tummy. I hate when people say tummy like that. You should only use tummy if you're talking if it hurts, if you want to fill it with food, but not when it comes to sex stuff. That's just so freaking weird. They all do this. Damn, the man had quite the smolder. Most reporters would be able to infer from the answer that they should go after a different story. Mac knew it was crazy, but if she didn't know better, she'd think Dixon was teasing her, if not outright flirting. Well, she could play that game too. But while she wasn't above using her feminine wiles to get a story, she needed to make sure she was right about him first. She moved a little closer. If he backed up, she'd assume she'd read him wrong, and would retreat accordingly. If he didn't, she might be able to work him a little bit. Dixon did neither? Oh, okay. Instead, he took a step toward her, so they were standing even closer together. She hadn't realized how big the SWAT officer was until that moment. He towered over her by almost a foot, and his shoulders were nearly twice as wide as she was. She decided she suddenly liked really big men. Damn, it was going to be hard remembering this guy was the target of her next in-depth investigative article. I've never been very good at picking up subtle hints. She gave him her best award-winning smile, the one she used on her editor when she wanted a really juicy story, and moved a fraction of an inch closer. He smelled nice. I was simply waiting outside the compound so I could talk to you and straighten out the obvious misunderstanding the department had. Of course, he returned her smile with one of the sexiest grins she's ever seen, because it must have been a mistake. After all, what cop wouldn't want to talk to the ever-insightful Miss Mackenzie Stone, right? Exactly. Mac gave him a real smile this time. It was hard not to. He was one of those rare men who could be charming with a few carefully chosen words, and he seemed attracted to her. At least she was pretty sure he was. She was just trying to figure out how to use that attraction to weasel an invite for an in-depth interview with the hunky SWAT commander when the door to the operations vehicle opened and two of his men climbed in. They hesitated for a moment when they saw her, as if surprised to find their superior alone with a woman in the back of the operations vehicle. Pretty surprising. Not something you would expect. She wasn't sure why. It wasn't as if they could know she was a journalist looking for a story. One of the men was Senior Corporal Michael Taylor, the man who'd saved her life before. The other wasn't one of the three men she'd ID'd earlier, but recognized him from the files anyway. Senior Corporal Xander Riggs. He must have been the one who slipped into the building before she and Zach got there. Dixon took a step back, putting some space between them as Taylor closed the door behind him and Riggs. This is Mackenzie Stone from the Dallas Daily Star. Miss Stone, meet Mike Taylor and Xander Riggs, two of my senior team members. Being surrounded by three guys so big and muscular in a confined space like the operations vehicle should have made her feel claustrophobic. But that definitely wasn't how Mackenzie felt right then. She had made a serious effort to keep her mind in gear as she shook their hands. She had 100 questions about the operation she just witnessed, but there was one thing she needed to get straight first. Sergeant Dixon said that one of the bank robbers was KIA. That means he was killed in action, right? Riggs glanced at his boss, his dark eyes questioning. Dixon nodded, signaling it was okay to talk to her. Yes, one of the suspects was shot and killed by a member of the team. He left us no choice. When the power went out, he grabbed a hostage. We ordered him to drop his weapon, but he pointed it at the woman's head and was about to pull the trigger. A disabling shot wasn't an option because he was behind the woman. We didn't hear this because there was audio. Mac noticed Riggs didn't say which member of the team had shot the suspect, but based on the level of detail he provided and the way his muscle and his jaw flexed, she guessed it was him. That must have been a pretty tough shot, considering how crazy it was in there, she said, and in the pitch black, too. Xander's eyes narrowed, but he didn't say anything. She thought he would have taken it as a compliment, but instead he looked uncomfortable. Why did men find it necessary to downplay every heroic thing they did? Really? We have excellent night vision goggles, Taylor said. They help. Of course, she smiled at him. By the way, thanks for helping me back out there in the alley. It's possible I might have been a bit of a trouble. Taylor's mouth curved. When he smiled, he seemed a lot less intimidating. Something tells me you find yourself in trouble like that quite frequently. Max shrugged. Every now and then, she said before turning back to Riggs. I didn't see you enter the building with the rest of the team. Did you go in before I got there? Riggs threw Dixon a sharp look. Instead of giving the corporal the okay, he answered her question this time. We dropped Corporal Riggs off a few blocks out from the scene. He hoofed it in over the rooftops, where we were getting into position outside. He went in and set up the remote cameras and microphones while everyone inside was focused on us and the other police officers. Riggs and Taylor stared at their commander, clearly shocked by how open he'd been about their tactics to a member of the media. Mac was stunned, too. She'd been fishing when she'd asked the question. She hadn't expected them to actually answer her. Dixon chuckled. You don't have to look so alarmed. It's not like I shared state secrets. Besides, Miss Stone, we'll be coming by the compound later to take a look around and see how we operate. Mac did a double take. Seriously? How do you do a double take? I'm very curious. His amber eyes met hers. That's what you wanted, isn't it? An in-depth look at the day in the life of a SWAT officer? She was more interested in finding out if they were hiding something, but she didn't tell him that. I figured if I don't make the offer, you're only going to hang outside the compound for months until I agreed to let you in, or until you try to sneak into the middle of the next hostage situation. This way we can do our job without worrying about you popping up out of nowhere and you get to do yours without risking your life. She opened her mouth to thank him, but he held up a finger. There's one condition, though. Name it. You agree not to detail any of our tactical procedures or technique like the one I just told you about. You print those and you'll get my team killed. He lifted a brow. Do we have an agreement? Mac nodded eagerly. Yes. She'd agree to whatever he wanted if it got her into the compound, even if it meant going back on her word later. That's a fucking asshole thing to do. Although after today she wasn't sure there was a story. She seriously doubted these guys were doing drugs, regardless of what Marvin said. But that didn't matter. No way was she passing up an opportunity like this. I'll see you at the compound this afternoon, then, Dixon said as he opened the door for her. Say 3 o'clock? She smiled up at him. I'll be there. Mac had to resist the urge to do a little happy dance as she hurried back to the news van. She wasn't sure how it happened, but somehow she'd gotten herself an engraved invitation to get up close and personal with the country's most elite tactical unit, the Dallas PD SWAT. Well, okay. Chapter 2 will be tomorrow. Bye.